Welcome to an RPG in a Box video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to quickly explain how the map camera boundaries works, how to set them up, and how to get the most out of them. Okay. So, first of all, what are map camera boundaries? Well, they can be found in the Map Properties panel. If you scroll down, you should see Camera Boundaries option here. By default, it's disabled until you enable it, and then you'll get a couple of options here that you can use to set up your camera boundaries. So before we go into how to set them up, let's talk quickly about what camera boundaries are. They are a way of setting where and when the camera will track the player, and where the camera won't. So this can be used for example, closing off a smaller section of your game. So for example, if we didn't want the player to be able to see beyond these walls, to see the black space beyond, then we could have a very small camera boundary that keeps the camera within this room. And if the player ever wanders off to the edge, the camera doesn't follow them. So therefore the camera doesn't then see beyond the walls. There will be other uses beyond that, I'm sure, but that's the most immediate one I can think of at the moment, and the one I'm going to be using to explain how they're used. Okay, so we then, when we enable it on a map, we then have these options. It should be pointed out it's on a per map basis. So while I have it enabled on this map, if I don't have it enabled on another map, it won't be used on that map. So when it's enabled, you have a couple of options. You have a minimum and a maximum, and each of those have 3 boxes. This is your X, this is your Y, and this is your Z. So it's your, across, that way, and up. So let's talk about how camera boundaries work then. So this is going to be made a lot easier if I use a different tile to the one we've got on the floor. So I'm going to use grass for this, may as well. So if I click there and there for a moment, I'm going to click this tile, and I'm going to right click and copy the coordinates. And then I'm going to click off and go to my minimum, and I'm going to paste those coordinates. And it seems like those were already the coordinates, so that was lucky. So I'll click this one, right click, copy the coordinates, and paste those into there. So what you have to do is you have to set a particular tile as your minimum coordinate, and then another particular tile as your maximum coordinate. Now, what the camera boundaries is then going to do is it's going to draw a box around those 2 diagonally opposed tiles. So in this case, what's going to sort of happen behind the scenes is RPG in a Box is going to draw a boundary that's this size. Let me go to the place mode. It's essentially going to do that because it's going to draw a box. If you've got this is the minimum and this is the maximum, it's going to make that a square, with that being the top left coordinate and that being the bottom right coordinate. And this then becomes the area upon which the camera, while the player is inside this area, where the camera will freely follow the player. And then when the player is not in this particular defined area, the camera will remain in this defined area. Now, it should be pointed out that there are a couple of exceptions to that rule. So let me go into game and show you what I mean. So here we are in game. So you can see while I'm in this camera area, while I'm within the grass, the camera is following me around. Okay. However, as soon as I step off, it's going to stay where it was. Okay. However, notice that as soon as I move up, it still follows me in that direction. Okay. However, it won't follow me side to side until I'm back within the area. Now, that's not a bug. That is actually by design. The reason, the fact that it still follows you when you're out of the zone, but in the opposite direction, because it's how there's a technical reason for it. I can't really sort of, I'd have to look up the technical reasoning for it, but it's to do with how the camera can sync itself back up with the player when it's back in the boundary again. So it has to follow you if you're going in this direction. Now, it should be pointed out that it's the opposite. So if I go up and out, it will still follow me sideways, but it just won't follow me any further up until I walk back into the area again, and then it follows me in this direction. So it's all to do with the direction you're in when you leave. That direction will stop following you, but the opposite directions will still track. Okay? So for example, if I go towards the right and step out, then left and right will no longer work, but up and down will still track. Okay? However, if I leave the area by going up or down, then up or down will no longer track me, but left and right will. Okay? And that is by design. So if that's happening, don't worry, that's not a bug. Okay? The other thing you should be aware of is, of course, the moment I leave the bounds of the area, it will stop tracking me in any direction. Okay? So when I'm in the diagonal corner, once I've completely left both laterally and, well, both horizontally and vertically, the defined area, even though I'm not in it, as soon as you leave the whole area, it will stop tracking you completely. Okay, this is quite a small outside area, so it's difficult to completely show you that. So I might just go in and quickly add a bit more to the map. So let's just quickly add an extension to the map. I won't worry about walling it off. I'll just put a quick wall along the side. Although, to be honest, I don't even need to wall it off. We'll just connect this up. So let's just one more time go back into game. So here we are back in game. So as I was, this needs to be rotated. So as I was saying, if you leave the zone while walking forwards, I can obviously continue walking forwards, but I can move sideways and the camera will still track. But it won't follow me up and down until I'm back in that area. And likewise, if I go to the left, it will no longer follow me until I go back in the area, but I can still go up and down. However, the moment I leave both up and down and left and right, it will stop everything. Yeah, it will stop following me no matter whether I go left or right or up or down. But the moment I walk back into the area, it will track me left and right. Okay, so that's how an area works. Okay, just to understand that. So how to best use camera boundaries then? So the first thing to be aware of is that the player at the moment can zoom in and out and kind of defeats the purpose of the whole boundary, because if the whole boundary purpose in this case is to stop the player being able to see beyond these walls, then the player's ability to currently zoom in and out defeats that purpose. So if you're going to use camera boundaries, you're probably going to want to restrict zooming from the player. Okay, so you'd set a default zoom that allows your areas to work, in my case 40, and then I wouldn't allow the player to zoom out. So now if I play the game again, then now I'm at this zoom level, which is great because I can't see beyond the walls anyway, really. But even if they were, shorter walls, if they were just a bit further back, the camera would not be able to now look beyond them because it can't move that far. But also I can't zoom out now with my mouse wheel, so I can't break the illusion. Okay. Now, another thing that you might want to consider with camera boundaries is they're best used, but don't have to be. Like that's, my example is perfectly fine as it is, but they're also best used with top-down perspective. So you also might want to set the game to 90-degree camera pitch. And again, don't allow pitch control, because obviously the moment the player can rotate or zoom out, then they could potentially see where they shouldn't be able to see. So here I am back in game again. So if I just rotate, now obviously I can see the black void at the moment because I haven't put the walls in, but if this was just as it was, if it had been set up properly, you see I can't see the outside, and this is top down. So You could even zoom out a little bit more with top down and things like that. So let's just quickly talk about sort of the best way I would recommend going about building areas. So my personal advice, but obviously you can work your own way. This is, there's no right or wrong way to do anything. It's just, my advice would be to build your camera boundaries as soon as possible, get them almost done first, and also to begin with, map them out visually like I've done here, where I'm using a different colored tile so I can see my boundary, because you can't see it in the editor or in the game. So you may as well just map it out first so you can see where your boundary is. So this is the area where the camera will follow. And then you can set up your boundaries around that. So for example, if the boundary is trees, then I can go to my import assets, bring in some trees. Don't need Stumpy. Bring in a tree. And then I can decide how far out from when the camera stops tracking me do I want these trees, and how deep do I want the layer of trees before I stop placing trees and just have the void. So 2 layers is probably enough, because the camera's not even going to get that far. Okay, so go one more time into game. So if I rotate, obviously we've still got an issue with the fact that I haven't finished the side walls, but if we're going in this direction, you can see the camera's not going to follow anyway. I'm zoomed in quite a bit, so I might maybe slightly adjust the zoom just so that we can see the trees. So I can't remember if I think the bigger numbers are zoomed out. So let's try 45. Yeah, I think that's slightly zoomed out. Yeah, you can see the trees just about. So you might want to put them on the row in front. But the point is, once you've got these in place, that's your boundary. The camera can't go beyond them. So it's a way of sort of not letting the camera see outside the world and breaking the illusion that your world is not complete or isn't any bigger, if you know what I mean. Let me put a row of trees just in front, just so that we have something to look at. Although in this case, the player wouldn't be able to leave the boundary anyway. So I'm just going to change the zoom to 55. And we'll go in one more time. There you go. See, you kind of get the idea, especially if the camera's rotated this way, you can kind of get the idea. So you can walk along the trees, but you can't ever go any further than them. And the camera boundaries aren't going to follow anyway. So this would be a bad example. So this is why I say set up your camera boundaries first, and then set your actual physical boundaries, like the trees and the walls, around that boundary so that you know it's far enough away from where the camera isn't going to follow you, that you then just have wall here and no void, if that makes sense. So that's how I would go about the boundaries, is set them up early on in your maps and then build your map around the boundaries so you know that where the camera is and isn't going to follow the player. I should also point out, sorry, I forgot to mention, that obviously camera boundaries do work vertically as well. So you could say 0 is the minimum, and then you could say 100 is the maximum. And then once the player somehow manages to get above 100 in grid height, then it will stop tracking upwards with the player. And you can also say if they go below 0, it will stop tracking them, so it will stay at ground level. So you can also set the height where it won't follow the player as well. And that would be the same. This would basically create a cube, because if you think about, without this, it being a 2D square, and then if you add height difference between the minimum and the maximum, that will create an actual cube, because it will have height as well. So that's important to point out as well. But anyway, as I say, that's hopefully covered everything. If you have any questions, of course, do ask on the Discord. But for now, that'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next tutorial.